There are legends, and then there are echoes that roar through centuries. Among them stands Gjergj Kastrioti, called Skanderbeg, the William Wallace of Albania, a man born of noble blood who rose not only through the ranks of the greatest empire of his time, but turned on it with a defiance so resolute it stunned sultans. Taken hostage as a boy, moulded into one of the empire's finest commanders, and then reborn as a rebel prince, he confronted the mighty Ottoman war machine head-on and delivered some of the most humiliating defeats in their imperial history. His tale is one of courage, cunning, betrayal, and brutal perseverance. Let us begin not in victory nor in fire, but in silence. A silence wrapped in the thick mountain fog of northern Albania, where a boy named Gjergj Kastrioti, later known as Skanderbeg, was born in 1405 into the noble house of Kastrioti. His father, Gjergj Kastrioti, was one of the most powerful Albanian lords of the time, ruling over vast territories in northern Albania, including the fortress of Gjergj. Gjergj Kastrioti had submitted to the Ottomans in the early 15th century, likely during the reign of Sultan Murad II, and was forced to send his sons, including Gjergj, as royal hostages to the Ottoman court to ensure loyalty. Thus began Skanderbeg's long and reluctant relationship with the Ottoman Empire. As a child, he was taken to the Sultan's court in Edirne, where he was educated and converted to Islam. There, he received the name Iskender Bey, Lord Alexander, in deliberate homage to Alexander the Great. He was enrolled in the devy system, trained in military arts, Turkish culture, Islamic theology, and Ottoman administration. By the age of 20, Skanderbeg was serving as a high-ranking cavalry officer in the Ottoman army, participating in campaigns in Asia Minor and Europe. Skanderbeg quickly distinguished himself as a brilliant commander, known for his skill in tactics, logistics, and battlefield leadership. He played a key role in several Ottoman victories across Asia Minor and the Balkans. Notably, he took part in the suppression of revolts in Anatolia and helped secure Ottoman control over parts of Greece and Macedonia. His exploits during the campaigns in the Peloponnese and against rebellious Turkish beys earned him high praise and personal commendation from Sultan Murad II himself. These achievements were critical in the empire's efforts to consolidate power in newly acquired territories. His ability to both inspire troops and apply battlefield strategy made him one of the most respected provincial commanders in the Ottoman ranks. He was appointed Sanjak Bey of Dibra, giving him administrative control over a significant region near his homeland. His military success earned him respect even among Ottoman elites. But beneath the polished surface of his Ottoman career, resentment simmered. He had not forgotten his roots. He had not forgotten Albania. The critical moment came in November 1443 during the Battle of Niš, where Christian forces under John Hunyadi dealt a blow to Ottoman troops in Serbia. Seizing the moment, Skanderbeg deserted the Ottoman army with about 300 loyal Albanians and made his way to Gjergj. There, he forged a sultanic edict ordering the surrender of the fortress to him. The garrison, believing the document genuine, complied. The Ottoman commander of the fortress, along with his soldiers, had little choice but to surrender peacefully under the false authority of the Sultan. Historical sources indicate that the commander, stunned and humiliated by the ruse, was detained by Skanderbeg and later ransomed back to the Ottomans. Skanderbeg saw value in sending a message to the Sultan, not just through warfare, but through symbolism. Sparing the rank-and-file soldiers and showing clemency to the commander gave him an aura of both ruthlessness and statesmanship. Some Ottoman sympathizers were expelled, while others were quietly integrated or held for intelligence. The castle was immediately reinforced with loyal Albanian forces. This strategic act not only won him the fortress, but secured it without wasting a drop of Albanian blood. Skanderbeg reclaimed his ancestral seat, and on 28 November 1443, he raised the double-headed eagle flag above Kruja, a symbol of resistance that would become the national emblem of Albania. The Ottomans were stunned. Their own celebrated commander, groomed within their own ranks, had used the empire's structure and bureaucracy against them. And what followed was even more humiliating. Successive defeats at the hands of a man they had once called their own. On 2 March 1444, Skanderbeg convened the Assembly of Lezhë, uniting Albania's fractious nobles, including Leka Dukagjini, Andrea Thopia, and Pal Dukagjini, into the League of Lezhë. Though a loose military alliance, it was the first real attempt at Albanian unity. Skanderbeg was elected commander-in-chief and began organizing a standing army funded by member lords. The first major confrontation came in June 1444 at the Battle of Torvioll. A 25,000-strong Ottoman force under Ali Pasha clashed with Skanderbeg's army of 10,000. Skanderbeg used terrain, surprise, and discipline to rout the Ottomans. Over 7,000 enemy soldiers were killed. This defeat shook Ottoman confidence. For an empire that had, for centuries, mastered the art of defeating larger armies with leaner, more disciplined forces, from Kosovo to Nicopolis, it was a brutal inversion of their legacy. The Ottomans had built their name on strategic finesse, using cavalry, discipline, and tactical genius to humiliate larger crusading forces. But now, here in Albania, their advantage was shattered. Skanderbeg had reversed the rulebook. His smaller, fiercely motivated army was routing Ottoman legions. The bitterness in the Ottoman court was profound. It was not just a military setback. It was a spiritual insult to a power that had long seen itself as invincible. Ottoman chroniclers recorded the Sultan's reaction, disbelief and fury. One report quotes Murad II as lamenting that his finest generals had been outmatched not by a king, but by a traitor with a band of shepherds. Still, Western support was fickle. Pope Eugenius IV hailed Skanderbeg as Athleta Christi, champion of Christ, and King Alfonso V of Aragon signed a vassal treaty in 1451, pledging support. Yet political hesitation, Venetian suspicion, and shifting alliances left Skanderbeg to largely face the Ottoman storm alone. He also found himself at odds with the Republic of Venice, whose interests in the Adriatic clashed with his growing influence. Tensions escalated into open warfare in 1447, when Venice backed local rivals and sought to contain Skanderbeg's territorial control. Despite being pressured by two great powers, the Ottomans from the east and Venice from the sea, Skanderbeg defied both. He led successful raids into Venetian territories and negotiated a peace in 1448, gaining recognition and tribute. It was a rare diplomatic victory in a life defined by military ones. He was once their pride, now their nightmare. With a forged decree and a bloodless coup, Skanderbeg turned the weapons of empire against its masters and lit the first flame of a rebellion that would burn for decades. In a world ruled by sultans and popes, he carved his own path, uniting rivals, defying empires, and shattering the myth of Ottoman invincibility. Giant armies melted before his courage and cunning. What should have been easy victories for the world's mightiest empire became humiliating routes, crushed by a man fighting with fewer men, but far greater purpose. But what we've seen so far is only the prologue, because now the empire strikes back. In the next chapter of Skanderbeg, the Dragon of Albania, 100,000 Ottoman troops surround Gjergj. The mountains will tremble, the siege will suffocate, betrayals will cut deeper than swords, and amid the fire and frost, the legend will be tested like never before. The dragon has risen. In the spring of 1450, the full fury of the Ottoman Empire came crashing down upon a lonely mountain stronghold in Albania, Gjergj. Sultan Murad II, weary of Skanderbeg's endless defiance and emboldened by a decade of imperial consolidation, unleashed an invasion of staggering scale. 100,000 soldiers, a host worthy of legend, marched through the rugged Balkan passes. Cavalry, janissaries, heavy siege artillery, camels dragging towers and mangonels. The earth itself groaned under the weight of the Sultan's ambition. At the heart of it all lay a tiny hilltop city, defended by barely 3,500 men, not even enough to fill a Roman amphitheatre. But these were not ordinary soldiers. They were veterans, Albanians hardened by years of mountain warfare, and they were commanded by a man who had become a nightmare, whispered in Ottoman camps, Gjergj Kastrioti, better known as Skanderbeg. Murad's intent was clear: no more diplomacy, no more raids and counter-raids. He would crush Albanian resistance in one conclusive siege. The Ottomans surrounded Gjergj on all sides, constructing siege engines and cutting off every road. From their lofty castle walls, the defenders could see nothing but a sea of tents stretching to the horizon, like the plains had been swallowed by a serpent made of iron and silk. But Skanderbeg was not inside the walls. He knew a direct confrontation would be suicide. Instead, he vanished into the forests, and from there, he waged war without rules. Night after night, lightning raids harassed the Ottoman flanks. Albanian cavalry struck convoys and retreated into the woods. Ottoman engineers would rise to find their towers burnt in the night. Supply lines, the arteries of any siege, were bled dry. Starvation crept into the enemy ranks like a second enemy. Even Murad's elite janissaries, trained to be fearless, began to whisper that Gjergj was cursed. The mountains watched them. The trees whispered ambush. Every path seemed to lead to blood. Inside the city, the defenders held firm. Though outnumbered 20-1, they rained arrows and boiling oil upon attackers, repaired broken walls under torchlight, and survived on rationed grain and grit. Morale did not crack, for they knew Skanderbeg was out there, turning the siege into a living hell. By autumn, the great Ottoman army was exhausted, diseased, and humiliated. 5 brutal months had passed. Victory was nowhere in sight. And now, it was not just the empire's pride on the line, it was the Sultan's own. Murad II, who had personally marched at the head of this colossal force, expecting to crush Skanderbeg in a single thunderous blow, found himself outwitted, outmaneuvered, and forced into retreat. What was meant to be a triumphant display of imperial might became a bitter spectacle of imperial frustration. It was not merely an Ottoman defeat, it was Murad's personal humiliation. Skanderbeg had not just won a battle, he had delivered a message to all of Europe. This mountain prince, with fewer men than a Roman legion, could defy the might of the East and win. The following year, Sultan Murad II died, and onto the throne ascended his son, young, brilliant and destined for legend, Mehmet II. The very same Mehmet who, as a boy, had once seen Skanderbeg striding the halls as a master in the Ottoman court and military academy, now returned to power with a greater vision than chasing a rebel ghost in the mountains. His gaze was set upon a far grander prize, Constantinople. And he succeeded. In 1453, Constantinople fell. The Eastern Roman Empire was no more, and Mehmet the Conqueror turned his attention to consolidating his domains and expanding further into Europe. But in Albania, the flame of resistance still burned. And so the question lingered, could even the formidable conqueror of Constantinople, the Fatih himself, cope with the relentless virtue and unorthodox genius of Skanderbeg's guerrilla war? Between 1450 and 1457, Skanderbeg maintained a defiant stance. Ottoman incursions continued, led by various pashas who sought to break Albanian resistance while Mehmed II looked westward. Skanderbeg, ever elusive, returned to his strategy of calculated ambushes, sudden raids and strategic retreats. He fortified mountain passes, strengthened alliances with neighbouring Christian powers, and rebuilt after each campaign like a phoenix from the ashes. In 1457, Skanderbeg delivered one of his most astonishing feats. At the Battle of Albulena, he faced Isa Bey Evrenos, commander of a substantial Ottoman force. For months, Skanderbeg executed a masterclass in military deception. False retreats, decoy camps, scattered signals. Ottoman scouts reported his forces in full withdrawal. Then, like thunder from a clear sky, he struck. Skanderbeg launched a sudden ambush on the unsuspecting Ottoman camp, descending with brutal precision. The result was a slaughter. Over 30,000 Ottoman soldiers were slain, caught utterly unprepared. It was a tactical symphony of timing, terrain, and raw courage. This victory struck deep into the heart of imperial pride. It came not only after Skanderbeg had humiliated Murad II, but now under the reign of Mehmed II, the very man who had shattered Byzantium, the man who had closed one age and opened another in world history, whose name would echo through the centuries. And yet, even he could not break the will of the Albanian mountain prince. Yet the triumph came at a personal cost. This campaign also marked the bitter beginning of betrayal by his nephew, Gjergj Kastrioti, whom Skanderbeg had loved like a son. They had shared the trauma of being royal hostages at the Ottoman court, raised side by side, shaped by the same lessons in war and politics. Skanderbeg had shielded Gjergj, groomed him as a confidant, and granted him command in his forces. But the birth of Skanderbeg's son extinguished Gjergj's hopes of succession. Resentment took root. During the Albulena campaign, Gjergj secretly began passing intelligence to the Ottomans, undermining his uncle's plans from within. When the truth surfaced, it was not merely a military betrayal, it was a wound to the heart. Skanderbeg, the unbreakable general, was devastated. The pain was not in the strategy lost, but in the loyalty shattered. It was not merely treachery, it was heartbreak. But this was only the beginning. Skanderbeg had just shattered the pride of sultans and shaken the empire to its core. Yet greater storms loomed. For as the world hailed him as Christendom's last wall, Mehmed the Conqueror, the man who had taken Constantinople, was preparing to strike back. Harder, smarter, relentlessly. Though crowned with the glory of Constantinople, Mehmed II found his ambitions divided. The Balkans were restless, and his most persistent thorn was the mountains of Albania, where Skanderbeg held firm. Preoccupied with dangerous uprisings and the unpredictable fury of Vlad the Impaler in Wallachia, Mehmed could not always take the field himself. Instead, he delegated command to provincial generals and lesser viziers. Second and third tier commanders tasked with defeating a man who had already humbled their finest. This proved to be one of Skanderbeg's great advantages. While he commanded with experience, passion, and total authority, his enemies arrived under orders, not conviction. They lacked both local knowledge and strategic vision, and Skanderbeg made them pay dearly for it. Still, Mehmed launched a major offensive in 1466, erecting Elbasan fortress to choke Skanderbeg's power. Kruger was besieged once more. Facing this escalating threat, Skanderbeg turned once again to diplomacy. He departed for Italy, where he met with Pope Paul II, King Ferdinand I of Naples, and other leading figures of Christendom. Skanderbeg was received in Rome with full honours as a Christian champion. He addressed the papal curia, urging a united front against the Ottoman tide. Letters and treaties flowed, reaffirming earlier pledges and attempting to revive a pan-European defence. Over the years, Skanderbeg had carried on active correspondence with multiple popes, including Eugenius IV, Nicholas V, Calixtus III, and Pius II. Pius had even planned to lead a crusade personally, inspired in part by Skanderbeg's pleas. Though these efforts were often frustrated by war fatigue and internal rivalries among Christian kingdoms, they underscored Skanderbeg's position not only as a military leader, but as a diplomatic envoy for all of southeastern Europe. He also maintained contact with the Doge of Venice and navigated the precarious alliance with King Matthias Corvinus of Hungary, who admired Skanderbeg and had offered support against both Ottomans and Venetian encroachments. His appeals reached the Duke of Burgundy and other Western powers, and though soldiers were few, the admiration was great. In one famous letter to the Pope, he wrote, "If my sword is not enough, let your word lift it higher." Upon returning with a modest force in early 1467, Skanderbeg unleashed a masterclass in attritional warfare. While the Ottomans maintained their siege around Kruger, he refused open battle. Instead, he turned the countryside into a theatre of chaos, striking at supply caravans, ambushing foraging units, and haunting the flanks of the enemy with surgical precision. The harsh Albanian winter aided his cause. Hunger gnawed through the Ottoman ranks, disease spread unchecked, and morale collapsed beneath the weight of uncertainty. By spring, unable to hold their ground or summon reinforcements, the Ottoman forces withdrew in frustration. It was Skanderbeg's final and perhaps most poetic military triumph. Despite these victories, Albania was breaking. Crops were burned, cities razed, and the people starved between sieges and seasons. The land had become a graveyard of hope. In the final months of his life, Skanderbeg, weary and outnumbered, retreated into the forests and mountains he had once turned into fortresses. There, pursued by Ottoman detachments desperate to capture him, he played a fading game of hide and strike. The hunter had become the hunted. Exhaustion gripped him. Nights spent in the cold woods, under pouring rain and wind that howled like distant battle cries, took their toll. His body, once unbreakable in plate and conviction, began to falter. It was not a sword or an assassin that brought him down, but the quiet, creeping bite of illness. Stricken with malaria in the bleak winter of 1468, Skanderbeg died in Lezhë on 17th January, aged 62. It was not the death of a warrior in glory, but of a legend retreating into the silence of the mountains, fading not in defeat, but in exhaustion. And yet, even in death, he did not yield. His body was entombed in the Cathedral of St. Nicholas. But later, when the Ottomans captured the city, they exhumed his bones, believing they carried magical power. His weapons were taken to Istanbul. His throne may have vanished, but his legend had just begun. After his death, Leke Dukakjini attempted to continue the League's resistance, but the Ottomans moved swiftly. Gjergj fell in 1478, and Albania was absorbed into the empire. It would remain so until the 20th century. Yet Skanderbeg was never forgotten. From the frescoed halls of Renaissance Italy to the secret schools of Ottoman-occupied Albania, his name was whispered as prophecy and pride. He re-emerged as a nationalist icon in the 19th century. His goat-headed helmet and massive sword became relics of national identity, now housed in Vienna. His correspondence with popes, his defiance of sultans, his unity of clans once drenched in feud. This was not just the tale of a warrior. It was the story of a people who had found in him their voice. Skanderbeg's rebellion was not merely a regional insurrection. It was a crucible of national identity forged in the fires of overwhelming odds. For 25 years, he held the might of the Ottoman Empire at bay, not through strength alone, but through unity, cunning, and undying belief. His life is a testament to the power of resistance, the necessity of leadership, and the enduring will of a people to choose their fate. He wrote letters to popes, kings, and emperors, but his true message was to the generations after him: never kneel. This was Skanderbeg, the Dragon of Albania.